If you've ever planned something big and then did absolutely nothing about it, you aren't lazy. There is a literal neurological cycle in your brain that is hijacking your dreams. And the fix is so simple, it's almost embarrassing. Have you ever sat down with the best intentions to finally tackle that one big project? You know the one that's been sitting on your to-do list like a heavy weight for weeks, only to find yourself 30 minutes later deep in a rabbit hole of cleaning your kitchen junk drawer or scrolling through your phone? You tell yourself you're just warming up or that you'll start as soon as the desk is organized, but deep down, there's this nagging sense of guilt. You feel lazy. You feel like you lack discipline. But here's the fascinating truth. It is not a character flaw, and it's definitely not because you're lazy. There is a literal neurological battle happening inside your head, and most of the time, you aren't even aware you're losing it. We've been told for years that procrastination is a time management problem. That if we just bought a better planner or used a different app, we'd suddenly become productivity machines. But researcher Tim Peichel and other cognitive scientists have discovered that procrastination is actually an emotion regulation problem. Think about the last time you avoided a task. When you actually thought about opening that laptop to start the assignment or hitting the gym for a grueling workout, what was the very first thing you felt? It wasn't, I don't have time. It was likely a sharp, cold spike of self-doubt, anxiety, or pure overwhelm. Your brain looked at that task and didn't see a to-do item. It saw a threat. This is where your brain's secret saboteur steps in. Deep in the primitive part of your brain lies the amygdala. This is your personal alarm system, the part of you designed to keep you alive by spotting predators in the wild. The problem is that your amygdala can't tell the difference between a hungry tiger and a difficult tax return. Both feel dangerous. Both trigger a stress response. When that danger signal goes off, your brain does exactly what it was evolved to do. It looks for a way to escape. It craves safety. And in the modern world, safety looks like the instant relief of doing something else. Anything else. That doesn't feel scary. This is why you suddenly feel a bizarre, urgent need to check your email or reorganize your bookshelf the second things get hard. That momentary sigh of relief you feel when you step away from the difficult task. That is a shot of dopamine. It's a reward. Without realizing it, you've just rewarded your brain for running away. You've unknowingly fed the saboteur, and it's beginning to learn that whenever life gets uncomfortable, the best solution is to hide. This is the birth of the avoidance loop, a cycle that keeps you stuck not because you don't want to succeed, but because your brain is trying to protect you from a threat that isn't actually there. Understanding this is the first step toward taking the power back, because you can't fix a problem until you realize it's not your personality. It's just your biology playing a very convincing trick on you. It's a strange, almost hypnotic experience when you decide to blow off something important. One minute you're staring at a blank screen with a pit in your stomach, and the next, you've decided that today is actually the perfect day to research the entire history of the Roman Empire or finally learn how to make sourdough from scratch. Suddenly, that heavy, crushing weight of the big task lifts. For a fleeting moment, you feel light. You feel free. This is the high of doing nothing, and it is one of the most addictive substances your brain can produce. To understand why this is so dangerous, we have to look at what happens the second you turn your back on your goals. In psychology, there's a simple rule. Behaviors that are rewarded get repeated. When you avoid a task that makes you feel anxious, your brain experiences an immediate drop in stress. That sudden, feeling of relief isn't just a mood shift. It's a chemical reward. Your brain essentially says, "Great job. We escaped the scary thing. Here's some relief for your efforts." This is the mood repair trap. You aren't being productive, but you are successfully managing your emotions in the short term. The problem is that your brain is a very fast learner. It starts to realize that the quickest path to feeling good isn't actually finishing the work. It's avoiding the work. You begin to develop a Pavlovian response to stress. Stress equals avoidance, and avoidance equals relief. But here's the kicker. This high is a lie. It's what experts call a short-term mood repair at the expense of your long-term well-being. While you're reorganizing your desktop icons or watching just one more video, the actual task hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there, lurking in the back of your mind, and with every hour that passes, the threat grows larger. The anxiety you were trying to escape actually compounds. This is where the avoidance loop turns into a downward spiral. You start to justify the avoidance to quiet the rising guilt. You tell yourself, "I'm just waiting for inspiration." Or the classic, I actually work better under pressure anyway. These aren't truths, they are biological defense mechanisms. You are lying to yourself so you can keep riding that wave of temporary relief. Even worse, your brain starts to get clever. It starts to offer you productive distractions to keep the guilt at bay. You aren't just sitting on the couch, you're pre-researching, you're planning, you're preparing. You're doing everything except the one thing that actually matters. This is the ultimate disguise of the secret saboteur. It keeps you busy enough to feel like you're moving, but in reality, you're just running in place on a treadmill of your own making. Every time you choose the high of relief over the grind of the task, you are physically strengthening the neural pathways of procrastination. You are essentially going to the gym and doing avoidance curls, making that habit stronger, faster, and more automatic. Your discipline, meanwhile, begins to atrophy like a muscle in a cast. You're training yourself to be a master of the escape room, but the room you're escaping is your own potential. The high feels good for 10 minutes, maybe an hour. But the crash, the realization at 11 p.m. that you're in the exact same spot you were at 9 a.m., is devastating. Breaking this cycle requires more than just trying harder. It requires understanding that the relief you're chasing is actually the very thing that's keeping you trapped. You have to learn to stop falling for the short-term fix if you ever want to achieve the long-term win. Now, if you're feeling that high of doing nothing right now, I have something that turns that temporary relief into real, lasting momentum. My ebook, 30 Days to a Better You, is designed specifically to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. It's not about grand gestures. It's about a 30-day roadmap of small, manageable shifts that build the discipline you've been missing. Grab your copy at the link below and let's start reclaiming your time. Now, let's get back to how your brain is actually hijacking your progress. To truly understand why you're stuck, we have to look under the hood. Imagine your brain as a high-stakes boardroom where two very different executives are fighting for the steering wheel. On one side, you have the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. Let's just call it the CEO. This is the rational, forward-thinking part of your brain that knows you need to finish that report to get the promotion or study to pass the exam. It's logical, it's disciplined, and it has a long-term vision for your life. On the other side of the room sits the amygdala. This is the security guard. The amygdala doesn't care about your 5-year plan or your career goals. Its only job is to scan the horizon for danger. It is ancient, impulsive, and incredibly fast. In a perfectly functioning brain, the CEO and the security guard work together. The CEO says this task is hard, and the security guard says, I feel some tension, but the CEO stays in control and pushes through. But when you procrastinate, what you're experiencing is something neuroscientists call an amygdala hijack. The moment you face a task that feels too big, whether it's starting a business, writing a difficult email, or even just doing the dishes when you're exhausted, the security guard panics. It senses the negative emotions. The fear of failure, the dread of boredom, the anxiety of being judged, and it treats them like a physical threat. It screams, "M ebode," emotional pain detected. In that split second, the amygdala physically overrides your rational brain. It floods your system with stress signals, effectively shutting down the CEO's ability to think logically. This is why, in the heat of procrastination, you feel like you physically cannot start. You aren't being lazy. You are under a biological siege. Your rational mind is screaming, just open the file, but your emotional brain has already grabbed the steering wheel and is veering the car toward the nearest exit. Usually a YouTube tab or a snack in the fridge. This hijack is incredibly subtle because the amygdala is a master of disguise. It doesn't always make you feel scared in a way you recognize. Instead, it might manifest as a sudden, intense need to do something else. It convinces you that you're just resetting your focus or that the timing isn't right. It uses your own intelligence against you, creating logical-sounding excuses to justify a purely emotional escape. The tragedy of the amygdala hijack is that every time it wins, it gets stronger. Every time you flee from a task to find relief, you are reinforcing a neural pathway. You are teaching your brain that the CEO is weak and the security guard is right to be afraid. Over time, the procrastination circuit in your brain becomes a high-speed superhighway, while the discipline circuit becomes a crumbling, overgrown backroad. This is why willpower usually fails. Willpower is a tool used by the CEO, but the CEO has been locked out of the room. You can't white-knuckle your way through a biological hijack indefinitely. To win this war, You have to stop trying to overpower the security guard and start learning how to calm him down. You have to understand that the dread you feel isn't a signal to stop. It's just a false alarm from a part of your brain that is trying to protect you from a danger that doesn't exist. Recognizing the hijack as it happens is the only way to slip the CEO back into the driver's seat. So if we know our brain is being hijacked by a panicked security guard, how do we actually fight back? If willpower is a failing engine, what's the fuel we need to get moving? The answer is embarrassingly simple, yet it's the one thing most of us resist with every fiber of our being. You have to just start. But wait. Before you roll your eyes and think, if I could just start, I wouldn't be watching this. There's a very specific neurological trick to this. The reason just starting feels impossible is that you're looking at the mountain, not the first step. When you tell yourself, I need to write this 20-page report, your amygdala sees a giant, jagged peak and immediately triggers the alarm. To bypass the security guard, you have to make the task stupidly small. A stupidly small task is an action so tiny, so ridiculously easy that your amygdala doesn't even bother to wake up. It's a task that carries zero threat because it requires zero effort to fail. Instead of writing the report, your task is simply to open a blank Word document and type the title. That's it. Instead of doing a 1-hour workout, your task is to put on your left sneaker. This works because of a concept Tim Pichel spent decades proving. The dread of the task is almost always worse than the task itself. When you are in the avoidance loop, your brain is hallucinating a version of the work that is 10 times more painful than reality. But the moment you engage in the stupidly small action, the spell breaks. You've crossed the threshold. Once the document is open or the shoes are on, the threat vanishes because you're actually doing it. You've successfully tricked your CEO back into the driver's seat before the security guard even noticed the keys were missing. But there's a vital first step you have to take before you even shrink the task. You have to catch it and name it. The next time you feel that sudden urge to check your phone or clean your room instead of working, stop. Don't judge yourself. Just observe. Ask yourself, what emotion am I trying to escape right now? Is it the fear that you aren't good enough? Is it the overwhelm of not knowing where to begin? Is it the boredom of a repetitive chore? The second you label the emotion, I'm feeling anxious about this project, something incredible happens in your brain. You shift the activity from your emotional amygdala back to your rational prefrontal cortex. You move from being the emotion to observing the emotion. By naming the hijack, you break its power over you. Once you've named it, you apply the 10-minute rule. Tell yourself, I don't have to finish this. I don't even have to do a good job. I'm just going to do this one tiny thing for 10 minutes, and if I want to stop after that, I can. 9 times out of 10, you won't stop. Because the hardest part of any journey isn't the miles in the middle. It's the friction of the first inch. When you make the task stupidly small, you lower the friction until it's non-existent. You aren't trying to move the mountain anymore, you're just picking up a single pebble. And once you have that pebble in your hand, you'll find that the next one is surprisingly easy to reach. This is how you reclaim your agency. One tiny, ridiculous, non-threatening step at a time. Think of your brain not as a finished masterpiece, but as a living, breathing landscape of trails. Every time you procrastinate, you are walking down the same path of avoidance. Each time you take that path, you pack down the dirt, clear away the brush, and make it easier to follow. Eventually, that path becomes a wide, paved highway. It's the path of least resistance. But here is the most hopeful thing you will ever learn about your mind. You are the one holding the shovel, and you can build a new road. This final stage is about rewiring your resilience. It's the process of moving from a brain that defaults to escape to a brain that defaults to action. And it starts with a fundamental shift in how you view failure. The avoidance loop is fueled by perfectionism. The terrifying disguise that tells you if the result isn't flawless, it isn't worth starting. But as researcher Tim Pichel's study on professors showed, the most perfect people often produce the least work. They are so afraid of falling short that they stay paralyzed at the starting line. To rewire your brain, you have to embrace what I call the B- mindset. You have to give yourself permission to be mediocre for the first 10 minutes. Every time you choose to name your emotion and start a stupidly small task, you are physically weakening the procrastination circuit and strengthening the discipline circuit. Imagine it like a muscle that has been in a cast for years. At first, using it feels clunky and painful. You'll feel that familiar pull to go back to the highway of avoidance. But each time you stay in the discomfort zone, for just 5 or 10 minutes, you are laying down a new layer of myelin, the insulation that makes neural signals travel faster. You are making discipline your new default. This isn't just about getting things done. It's about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. Procrastination is a form of self-betrayal. It's making a promise to your future self and then breaking it, which leads to a deep, underlying sense of guilt and low self-esteem. But when you start to break the loop, you begin to trust yourself again. You prove to your brain that you are capable of handling 10 minutes of boredom or 10 minutes of anxiety. You prove that the threat that amygdala is screaming about is just a shadow on the wall. And here's the secret that the students in Pichel's pager study discovered: the task is never as bad as the dread. Not one student in that study was glad they waited until the deadline. Once they were forced to start, they realized the work was actually manageable, even interesting. The monster they had been running from all week turned out to be a minor hurdle. By practicing these steps, catching the emotion, shrinking the task, and just starting, you are undergoing a process of neuroplasticity. You are literally changing the physical structure of your brain. You are training your CEO to recognize the security guard's false alarms and to keep driving anyway. Over time, the highway of avoidance begins to grow over with weeds. It becomes harder to take. Meanwhile, your new road, the road of resilience, becomes smooth and fast. You'll find that the gap between thinking about a task and doing it gets smaller and smaller. You won't need to wait for inspiration or the right mood, because you'll know that the mood follows the action, not the other way around. You aren't a procrastinator. You are a person with a highly protective brain that needs a little bit of retraining. So don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for the guilt to kick in. Choose one tiny thing right now, name the fear, and give yourself 10 minutes. Your future self is already on the other side of that 10 minutes, and they are waiting to thank you for finally taking the first step.